Welcome to Flying Minds, where we dive deep into the lives and careers of the aviation professionals who keep the skies in motion. I'm your host, Stefan Grisbrook, and today we're joined by an incredible lady, Jenna Heacock, Vice President of Operations at Knight Aviation and Logistics. Jenna's journey to aviation is anything but conventional. She kicked off her career in broadcasting, graduating from Knight's radio and television arts program, and cutting her teeth as a news reporter and sports anchor in northern Alberta, before sharpening her creative writing skills in Edmonton's major market radio scene. Jenna's drive for growth led her to Calgary, where she earned a business degree from St. Polytechnic, majoring in marketing. Undeterred by the 2008 recession, she launched into consulting, delivering small business marketing makeovers with her signature flair. A twist of fate and a friend's suggestion brought Jenna into aviation when she joined Enerjet, a Calgary-based charter company, as a flight attendant. She quickly fell in love with this industry, taking on roles in training and safety instruction before seizing an opportunity in sales support, blending her business acumen with her passion for aviation. That move led her to work alongside Darren Knight, founder of Knight Aviation and Logistics, where she spent the last decade honing her expertise. From navigating industry challenges to absorbing knowledge from peers and professionals, Jenna has risen to become a key leader at Knight Aviation, guiding clients through the complex world of aviation and logistics with skill and enthusiasm. Jenna's story is one of resilience, adaptability, and a relentless pursuit of growth. So buckle up as we explore her fascinating career and the insights she's gained along the way. Jenna, before we get started, I just want to talk to my listeners about today's episode. Flying Minds was born out of a need to increase awareness in mental health for our pilots in aviation. However, since starting Flying Minds, through conversations with either flight crew, flight attendants, anyone for that matter involved in some way, shape, or form in aviation, and even people who are not in this industry, there's a desire to hear conversations from all aspects of the aviation world. Hence, the subtitle on Flying Minds, Navigating the World of Aviation. So, today we have a great story of how Jenna's grandfather, a World War II pilot, at a very young age flew the Spitfire, which continues to inspire Jenna's love to be involved in this wonderful industry, and how those stories continue in this family in aviation. Okay. Welcome to Flying Minds.
Thank you.
Miss Jenna.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to be connecting with you today.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah.
We've got a little bit of history. We
Mm-hmm.
can get into that a little bit later. But before we get going, can you introduce yourself to the listeners as if you're someone else describing you?
Well, you did make it very clear that I have to describe myself in a perspective from somebody who likes me. Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
somebody who likes you. Well,
That's a good spot to start, I think.
I mean, we could go down the other road.
We could call my brother right now.
Oh, let's
I'm
not
sure
get
he would-
siblings
I'm sure-
involved.
I'm sure he would have some very acute feedback. So my name is Jenna Heacock, and I think that I would be described, I'm a pretty good time. I think I'm pretty dedicated. I think that my closest friends and confidants would agree that I am a very driven person. I believe I find a nice balance between work and play, and that's very important to me. The people in my life are very important. I really value community, whether that's within your personal network or the people you run across. Either way, the people in my life are very, very important, and I think that those connections are incredibly important. And I think that everybody that I'm involved in would agree that that's shown as a high priority for me.
You do very well living in Hawaii.
Oh my God. Among so many reasons why I think I would do well there. You'd never find shoes on my feet ever. I think I'd be barefoot the entire time.
Yeah. Well, when I lived there, it was, the Hawaiians it's all about ohana.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about
See
family.
my
and
little
friends.
tattoo?
Oh, my.
My ohana tattoo?
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Is this a sign?
This is a sign. Jenna's moving to Hawaii. I've got a great little place. I know where you should go.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you one more question on that.
Yeah, yep.
What are you the champion of?
Oh, you know, I really do think I'm a good champion in advocating for other people. I think I could do a better job of advocating for myself a little bit, to be quite honest. But I really believe in pumping people up, showing people where their worth is and boosting them to be their best selves, I think. And I mean that within, yeah, friends, family, work environments. I think empowering people to move to their best self or highlighting where they're amazing is so important. I could be out and about and see a woman, for example, and think, oh my gosh, I like her jawline is amazing. And this happened at the Cactus Club, actually. This was in December. And I went up to her on the way and I'm like, excuse me, I just have to say that your jawline is stunning. I think you're gorgeous. Just have a lovely day. And her friend looked at me and she's like, right? She never believes me. And this woman looked like, I can't believe you just said like that's thank you so much. But I think that we so often assume that people are negative in their thought when there's a stare or not enough people say the good things. You can look at the comment section on anything on the internet or sitting in the hockey rink. You can hear
Let's
people
go
there's
down there.
there's a lot of negative talk. And I really try to be the champion of not being that negative talk. I really think that it's important that if you see something amazing, you should say it. And the first time that experience came to me, I was pregnant. And one of my ex-husband's friends, she looked at me and she said, I hope you feel as good as you look. And it was the most unbelievable compliment. And I thought, that was so kind of you to say, and so I don't think it takes a lot to just kind of put some good out there. And so that's what I try to be the champion of. It doesn't take money. It doesn't take anything. It just takes a moment to say, hey, I see you. Everybody just wants to be seen.
So when you get up in the morning and look in the mirror, what do you say to yourself?
I could do a better job of saying nicer things. They call that mirror talk, Stefan.
Well, you got to look in the mirror.
Yeah.
I am a champion.
Yes. And I think that is certainly something that I'm working on is speaking to myself the way I like to speak to others.
There you go.
You know?
So we've kind of digressed off the aviation topic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
I love
the
it.
thing. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
Okay. So give me some background of your family history in aviation or the history that continues to this day.
Yeah. So for me personally, I mean, I am in aviation. That is how we got to talking and how we met actually was through my own career in aviation, which is nowhere near where I had intended to be at all. It wasn't on my radar. Going through school, college, I wasn't like, oh, let's be in aviation. But aviation is really thick in my family. My brother, currently, he's a pilot at WestJet. My dad had his private pilot's license. My grandfather is where the majority of this came from. He was a Spitfire pilot in World War II. He flew for the RCMP up north in the Arctic. And so, growing up, it was normal to go over to my grandparents' house and, there's some war movie on or some documentary about some aircraft. And, it just was normal and it was something that was very natural. I didn't think it was weird, but, when everybody doesn't have war stories going on all the time, but it was very light. It wasn't a heavy conversation, any of the war stories. And I think being a grandchild to my grandfather, that was the benefit. I got the good stories. I got the stories about his dog Toby and about, the different sort of kitschy stories that he had about being in the war and in aviation. I didn't get the dark stuff. But that's where the aviation piece came from. It was something that we always had, always heard about, always knew that, Grandpa was this pilot.
Did you put any importance of that when you were younger?
No.
Did it mean anything to you, or it was just Grandpa talking?
It was just Grandpa talking. It was family talking. I mean, he had an aircraft. Please don't ask me what type of aircraft it was. From what I remember, it was yellow. My dad will
Right.
tell me what it was. But, it just was grandpa. That was our life growing up. And, it wasn't even just him. My grandmother too, her family housed American pilots before they went to war as a means of making money in World War II. Um, and, so that was their time. Everybody had their war story and there's just collaborated through aviation. And, it was not on my radar whatsoever. And I think maybe because it was so talked about. It wasn't something that I really thought. I was like, "Oh, yeah, everybody does
Right.
that."
Right.
But I'm actually the only one in my family other than my brother, and he's my stepbrother, that has a current career in aviation, which is kind of an interesting piece. But, yeah, we had nothing but stories about that stuff. I mean, to give you an example, there was so many of the stories and the viewing and all those kind of things going on that when I was little, I had thought that, "Oh, you need to have me be in the military in some way." In my little mind, it wasn't like, "Let's become a nurse or this." I thought being a sniper would be a great idea. And the reason being because I was like, "Okay, well, if we have to choose to be in the military, that one seems less scary because 'cause you're away from whatever's happening." So I was, walking around with my mushroom cut and pink jumper thinking I'd be a sniper, but here I am.
Well, you could be a sniper in a different way.
In it, yeah, I
Right?
guess so, yeah. It depends how you look at it.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Alberta. So I was born and raised in Carstairs, Alberta, which is just north of Calgary here, a prairie town.
Hmm.
And then my dad was transferred when I was in grade 6 to Drayton Valley, Alberta.
A little
Yep,
farther north.
a little bit farther north. Yeah, a little bit more treed, but a little bit farther north. But I am Alberta born and raised.
What about your grandparents?
Oh gosh, you're asking all the good questions.
So where would your grandfather have been when he got into
He was in Alberta.
it was Alberta?
He was in Alberta. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he ended up being he wanted to fly airplanes. He wanted to be in the RCAF. That line was really, really long. So he, in order to get flying and get trained up, he joined the RCMP and was stationed in Halifax. And then when he was able to, get his name pulled up here for the RCAF, he took off in. Did you get that pun?
Yeah, I did.
He took off. He took off. Oh man, that was cheesy. I loved it so much.
The
With his
listeners are going to go,
career,
really? He took off.
he took
Okay.
off. Zing. With his career in, the Royal Canadian Air Force, the Royal Canadian Air Force.
There you go.
Hmm.
Do you remember where he was stationed when he first started flying?
In England. Are we talking about
Yeah.
in the RCF? Yeah,
Yeah.
in England.
Yeah.
I believe. Hmm.
Did he ever talk to you about some of his missions?
He
Or
did not. He had 112 though. He was in Squadron 412 with 112, I believe, completed missions, which I think is unbelievable that that's a lot of times to go out and come back. Um, so we didn't, like I said, we didn't get those dark stories. We got some cute stories. My grandfather had mentioned that, he lost both engines over enemy territory and, was plummeting towards the ground at the very last minute. They both came up and it's a miracle. And, with childhood gripped, ears were listening to this. And he said, well, thank God, because he had a date that night and he didn't want her to think he stood her up. So that was the tone of those stories that we got. We didn't get any sort of you know, PTSD, dark grandpa, or anything along those lines. And I'm only speaking for myself here, but it was always cheery, funny stories. My grandfather had a very, very dry sense of humor, which I absolutely adore and I see in my son. It's phenomenal. But
and
y-
maybe a little bit in Jenna.
maybe a little bit in me too.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was all sunshiny stories. Obviously, once you get older, you realize that that's not exactly how it was whatsoever. My grandfather, I was very fortunate to have both my grandparents on that side. We're talking about the Heacock side here. Until I was an adult. My grandfather passed away at 91 years old in 2011. So he was, I remember being at his last birthday. And, it's interesting because how old would I have been at that age? In my late 20s. I would have been in my late 20s when he passed away. And I
Do you want me
didn't.
to do the math for you?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I was in my late 20s-ish when he passed away, and I recognized only through the relationship that I got to have with my grandmother after he had passed, how many things I should have asked. How many things that I wish I could sit and have a conversation with them. My grandmother, she lived until a week short of her 99th birthday, and she passed away in 2021. So we got a full decade with her afterwards. And through that time, I got to, she got to meet my son, and we got a lot of time. I got a good chunk of time with her that I didn't in that childhood, early adulthood state of mind where I did get to ask her a lot of questions. And there's still many things that I wish I could have, but it didn't. But even more so, with my grandfather, it and it would have been great to ask him questions, understanding that I'm an adult and can hear an answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of all the sweet pieces that we got. It would have been great to hear a little bit more about all of the people he knew and didn't get to see anymore,
Yeah. There's definitely a dark side there that maybe he didn't want to talk about.
I absolutely agree, and I think that that's okay. That's, even with his children, I think that there's, a level of protection there. That if they're not talking, I can understand how that might be frustrating when you're trying to figure out why they are the way they are or what have you. But I think there was a certain level of discretion there. And I mean, it is just different generations as we go through time, especially when we speak about mental health, which is, I know, is a big piece of your intention for this podcast was to speak to those things. And I think the generations, they're progressing for sure when we talk about mental health and being so open about it and everything. But yeah, it would have been great to have those conversations with him, especially because he flew up north in the Arctic, and when
And that was with the RCMP.
that was with the RCMP, that's right. He was up near Fort Smith, and my dad and I actually had a conversation about this recently. And I was unsure to ask him because I didn't want to um, be going about this in a way where I was pushing blame or anything. But when residential schools was becoming a really big topic, rightfully so, and they're finding unmarked graves, etc., I wanted to ask my grandfather about that, him being in the RCMP, and just kind of in the northern communities, wondering if he knew, did you know? Was there participation unknowingly? And, in those days too, I mean, I'm sure he would have seen a great deal of stuff on his
So
time in
was
the war.
was he a pilot for
He was a pilot for the RCMP. So
was he an officer though?
mhm.
So he had to be obviously to work for them. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, in the conversation with my dad, it's likely would have not been his role. But I was just so curious about what would have been known to him. And would that have been normal? Is that just instructions that were, so when we talk about these conversations that of the history within our family, man, there's so many questions that come up. And I had the good fortune of having grandparents very late in my life, but still not late enough
Yeah.
to be able to have those conversations.
Yeah. I've gone through that in my head so many times because my grandfather was in World War II as well. And I don't recall any conversation with him about it.
No.
And I wished I had of. I was pretty young though. So
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. You were young.
Yeah.
I don't think, do you have grandchildren?
I have 4.
You have 4. So I don't imagine you would share with your 4 grandchildren your, most tragic moments at this age or until they're
Tragic
adults.
moments like one burning, one turning.
Whatever your tragic moments would be.
There I was.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I just think that it's a level of protection, but it's unfortunate because I think there's a large gap of understanding there. I mean, those people held so many stories, many stories. I've had, again, the good fortune of when my grandfather died, I remember going into their home because we were getting ready to move my grandmother out to a home. And they had this huge dining table and it was covered in photos and logbooks and all the things. And there was this book and you open it up and it was like a massive guest book is really all I can explain it. But what it was from my grandmother's home where they were housing these pilots before they went. Was it the American Eagles? Can you correct me on that?
I can't.
Okay, let's just call them the American.
Sure.
But before they went off.
Yeah.
And there would be pictures of them with, the family, and they would sign their name and when they were there. And as you go through this book, some of the entries had photos and some of them didn't. And the photos were of those who didn't come home, and there
Oh.
was so many of them. And I recall that with my grandfather's logbooks as well, I just think it was such an insanely different time. We know nothing like it with good fortune, at this point in time. I shouldn't say we. I know nothing like it, and I'm incredibly grateful for that, and I have the utmost respect for all those that have fought for our freedom, for sure. Remembrance Day in our house is a big deal. It's something that we certainly always pay attention to, and even though we got the light stories, we very much recognize, the good fortune that we've been able to have because of all of that.
Absolutely.
hmm
Actually, that as you're talking about the names in this book and the pictures, first thing that came to my mind is there's a historical fiction book called The Book of Lost Names.
Oh, interesting. I've never read that one.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's it's interesting, and yeah, it's interesting, and it's unfortunate that we don't get all the stories, but we get what we get.
There you go.
hmm
So let's talk about the Arctic.
Yeah,
Tell me
let's talk about the Arctic.
about the Arctic, because I know there's a story there
I
somewhere.
love the Arctic. So, yeah. So my grandfather, as we were talking, was up there. That's where a significant portion of his career was.
Was he based
monitoring
up
the
there?
North. He was, yes, in Fort Smith.
Fort Smith.
Yeah. And through with that, he had, a bunch of stories about, finding hunters, lost hunters, and navigating through the stars and all those kind of cool things. But within my career, and this is fast forwarding the story of my career quite significantly, but
We'll get back to that.
We'll get back to that. But
We're
I
just
love
kind
this.
of doing one of these.
We're just having a conversation, Stefan. But I loved this so much. So I working with one of our clients who's doing reclamation work up in northern Canada. Last summer, in my role, I was invited up with their geologist and reclamation crew to, look at some of the areas that needed to be reclaimed, some things that needed to be removed, as indicated and requested by Indigenous groups. And we got to go up to an island called Banks Island. And if you look it up, I encourage you to. It is the northernmost community in Northwest Territories. So we were in Sax Harbor, which is just on the southern edge of it, on Banks Island. And, it was a 2.5 hour twin otter ride from Inuvik up there. Absolutely stunning. However, if you are ever doing something like that, I encourage you to not get in your head about what would happen if you hit the icy waters.
Hit the icy
Just
waters.
don't even let your mind go there.
Well,
It'd be quick.
It'd be quick.
It'd be quick.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate enough that I can sleep easily in a plane. So that was great for me. But 2.5 hours in a twin otter, which I also love. I love the twin otter. It is an efficient aircraft. I like that one. But we got up there and, saw the community, and we were there briefly, and it was amazing. It was just such a gorgeous place to be, and also unreal that we can get there in 2.5 hours, and wonderful. I have a million stories of how much I loved it up there. But when I came home, and my dad wants to hear about my trip, tell me about the Arctic. Where were you? And, I pointed out, oh, yeah. And then we were in Sax Harbor. He's like, that is so cool, because that was where my grandpa would have to do some rounds in as well. And so this community that has, less than 100 people, I want to say, and again, don't quote me on that, but, a very, very, very small community in the northernmost part of our country. There was like 2 Heacocks within 3 generations that had the opportunity to go there for work in aviation. So it was kind of a cool little moment. But I feel very at home up there for someone who's never lived up there. But, we heard, again, back to the stories, so many stories about the Arctic and such when we were young. I mean, we built igloos in the winter for, fun. My grandfather would be like, here's how you do it. I've got his snowshoes that he had from up there hanging on my wall in my home. And yeah, it's just a place that I feel super inclined to, but I can't help but think that's a little bit genetic. Got some, Arctic inkling in me. It's awesome.
There you go.
It's a beautiful place, though.
I've never been fortunate enough to go up there, and
I encourage you to, if you ever get the opportunity. I get that it's not someplace that a lot of people are, keen to go to, but it's fascinating. It truly is fascinating. And it's it's unlike any other place. You know, it's lovely.
I don't think, oh, I do have a coat that's probably warm enough.
Get another one. Bundle.
Several layers.
Bundle, yes.
How do you even know how warm it gets up there? Like, what
Well,
would
when
be
I
the
was up
warmest?
there, I don't know.
Come on, Jenna.
But I mean,
Work with me here.
okay, well, I will tell you. So last year when I went up there, it was June. It was middle of June. And my first stop was in Dawson City. It was 30 degrees. So we were cooking. And then, we went up to Nuvik, and it was light coat weather. It was sunny. It was fine.
There you go.
Well, they've got all that sunlight all through the day.
All through, well,
Yeah.
I spent
All
lots
through
of
the day
time
and
at
night.
Anchorage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Flying from Narita
Yeah.
into Anchorage. That's where we'd do our stopovers and
Mm-hmm.
then head south into North America with all our freight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a cool place. It's a very cool place,
Yeah.
I think.
Yep.
Mind you, I have a nephew who is, he was born in Iqaluit. I want to say it properly, but my ignorance needs a little bit of work on how to properly pronounce it. But Iqaluit is what I want to say. That's how he's taught me how to say it.
Okay.
But I'm sure he would have a different piece of that. I mean, he was born there. He lives down here now. He's going to school in Edmonton, and I think it's fascinating. And I think he's got a different perspective on living up there, which is an interesting one for sure. Sometimes sad, sometimes really cool. But it's been interesting having him in mine and my son Charlie's life to get that perspective as well. When one of the first times he came down to visit us, my son didn't believe that there wasn't trees, that there was no trees. He's like, I'll show you. So he just sends him all these pictures. Like, there's no trees where I'm from. So it's been kind of a cool cultural learning piece.
I have
bit of our
been there.
country. Have you?
I had to ferry an F-28 from Dinard, France, back to Calgary. And that was our stop coming from, well, we were supposed to stop in Greenland. It's actually a pretty good story. So we left the northernmost part of Scotland and we flight planned into Greenland. And then we're going to fuel up and then go stop in Iqaluit, get fuel, and then head off to Calgary. Well, we got close to Greenland. We checked the weather. It was nasty. We looked at our fuel, and we had an empty airplane, so we had full fuel. Looked at the weather in Iqaluit and did our calculations. We're going to go. We're just going to keep on going. We're not going to stop in Greenland. We're about 200 nautical miles outside of Iqaluit, and Center came and told us, the runway in Iqaluit is closed because there's an aircraft on the runway. They had a flat tire.
I was going to say a moose.
And,
There's a moose.
Well, they can get rid of the moose. So the aircraft was stopped on the runway.
I guess it wouldn't be moose, it'd be a caribou. Anyways.
Yeah. So we're going, oh boy, where are we going to go now? So there was lots of, pencils. Pencil got out. We're trying to figure out where we're going to go. And we stayed high until we figured out where we were going to go. And then they came back and said, okay, they just towed off. They just towed off the aircraft. Said, okay, so off we went. And it was in the middle of winter. And we landed, well, actually went over top the runway, turned downwind, turned final, put the gear down. Only two gear came down.
Oh.
And we're looking at our fuel too, going, oh boy, this isn't good. Anyways, it was down, but I got out of the airplane and it was static temperature. I think it was like minus 45.
That's brisk.
With a 30 or 40 knot wind.
And
I walked into the terminal to clear customs there. By the time I got there, I couldn't even open my eyes. They were frozen shut. Okay, I digress again. I'm sorry. Anyways.
That's okay.
That's Iqaluit.
That's the north. Yeah, exactly. I think too, if I, being where I am now, if I could look back and if there's anything I could I wouldn't do anything over, but I would have loved to have spent more time up there for whatever reason when I was younger. I think that would have been,
Why do you think that would have given you a different perspective on life?
Maybe, but I just enjoy it. I just am curious about it. I'm curious about the culture. I'm curious about the land. I'm curious about all of the piece. So I just feel drawn to it in a way that I think it would have been cool to exercise a little bit more or gain a little bit more experience there. But I mean, there's still plenty of time left. But
See, now, if you'd have asked me who Jenna was,
Mhm.
I would have said Jenna is a very curious, well-read individual.
Oh, well, I certainly will accept that compliment. That's great. I thought you were going to talk about my swearing, but
I'm sure that'll come out. And this
I've been
is,
great so far.
you've been pretty good. So if it does come out, don't worry about it.
Okay. Okay.
I got my friend Denise on here, and yes, she just let her go.
Yeah. Well, good.
Okay, so talked about Sachs Harbor. We talked about the North. Let's get back to Jenna.
Okay.
So you started in broadcasting,
hmm
decided to come back down to Calgary or head to Calgary and get a diploma from SAIT.
hmm
And what was going on in your life that made you decide to go completely different, hang a right turn, go into aviation?
Well, that was confusing for a while, for sure. There was, with my background in,
Confusing for who?
for me,
Okay.
yes, for me, for sure. I mean, I like to, um, I like to have control of things, unfortunately, because that's not, always something
And why
that can
didn't you
be done.
become a pilot?
Oh my God, to be quite honest, I
Well,
hate,
please, you don't have to be honest.
no, I have
Okay.
y- very simple reasons for
Okay.
why I would not want to be a pilot. I hate math. And I feel like there's a lot on the line with getting the math right. So no,
Okay.
thank you. I don't even like driving on bad roads. I don't think flying in poor conditions would be something that I would be great at. I'm a comfortable flyer. I have no problems. I just have full trust in, the professionals. I think I fully trust pilots to do what they're doing and hands off for me, but I just don't think that's something that I would feel. I think I would take a lot of responsibility. And I think that I'm hoping most pilots are like understanding the responsibility that they have, but I think that it would be a detrimental thing. That'd be a lot.
Okay.
So no, thank you.
So we digress there.
That's okay. So no, thank you on the pilot, but I appreciate you asking.
Okay.
So where were we? We were
Why
Oh,
why the
confusing
90-degree
for me.
turn? Yeah, why the change to come into aviation?
It was really happenstance. I was working in Edmonton in radio, very young in my career, and I wasn't in that industry for very long. It was really cool though. It was a cool industry to be in, and I still have friends who are in it, and some of my best friends actually. I met when I was there, but I always kind of knew there was more that I would want to learn, um, and so I moved to Calgary. I came to Calgary to go to SAIT to take a business with a major in marketing. Marketing was something that I always felt that I had wanted to do. I just ended up detouring there, I guess, a little bit sooner than I had intended to. But I came to Calgary and in 2008 completed my program at SAIT. And just in time for us to be in a recession, which was just ducky.
That was 2008. Okay.
2008, yeah. And I wasn't ever super keen to be working for a big company. I didn't want to be pigeonholed into a role. I really wanted to absorb and learn as much as I could in various roles and from different individuals. So for me, going to a smaller company was something that I was more keen on finding. I wasn't finding anything really at that time. Maybe I wasn't looking hard enough. Who knows? I was, 20 some, but I started doing small business makeovers in essence for myself and just, photographers or whatever, just helping them get out there. And it wasn't a huge piece of what I was doing, but it was there. And I had a friend at a time who had just got a job as a flight attendant within the first class at Enerjet, which was a brand new charter company specializing in workforce transportation here in Alberta on Boeing 737-700s, which is where I met you.
Correct.
Yes. And she's like, "Hey, you should come be a flight attendant." And I was like, "All right, that sounds like a good time." And so I was fortunate enough to, make it through the interview process and within the second class of initial, and I started working as a flight attendant. So it kind of, um, it at the time it was very confusing because I'm like, what have I done here? What is going on? This is not anywhere near where I thought I would be. I mean, I was making money. I was living a great life. I loved being a flight attendant. I loved it. To this day, it is one of those jobs where I am so grateful that the opportunity presented itself at the time that it did. I had a great life. It was amazing.
Why did you like it? What was it about it that
It was just, it was, the company that we were working for at the time, Enerjet as well, I loved that it was small, so
it's a lot of fun, a good family there?
good family, right? And so when we talk about, I think I love connecting with people and having that connection, and you have the camaraderie of the groups. It was just so much fun, and I remember one summer just had the most excellent pairing. Like you couldn't get anything better. I would get on the aircraft at, 7 p.m. at night and take some passengers coming back from vacation in Mexico to Vancouver. So I had a 1 hour flight. Big deal. Would get off the aircraft and go for dinner with my crewmates. And we had the best time staying in Vancouver. And then I would wake up in the morning, and at the time I was training for a half marathon, and I would do my 18K by the river. And I had a best friend living in Vancouver at the time, and go for lunch with her and come back. And, by 10 p.m. on Saturday, you're heading back to Edmonton, staying there for a few hours, and then, fly 1 hour home of passengers. So I had 2 hours of passenger interaction and a whole weekend. Just
It wasn't always like that, though.
it was not always like that. There was a lot of back and forth to Firebag. But to be quite honest, those passengers were dreams too. I mean, they flew so often and they were there for work. They knew the routine. And so it was lovely. It was really lovely. I enjoyed it so much. It is certainly good old days. I'm glad to have had those good old days. Met a lot of great people, and it got my feet wet in aviation as well. It's where that little inkling came from. I remember being in initial training, and again, I was talking on the phone with my dad and going through what I was learning. And he said that he had never heard me so excited about something, and yeah, I just kind of went with it. I just went with it because I was having a great time. But um, yeah, there were certainly times where I was wondering what I was doing with myself because, well, can I share my growth story
Sure.
about really what made me think, the hell am I doing here?
Oh, okay. I
Here
know
we
where this
go.
is
Were
going.
you on my flight this day? I don't know. So, and here's,
Well, hang on a sec. Before you go into this story,
mhm.
I've been in this industry a long time. And if you tell me that you took something up to the flight deck and closed the door,
No,
I wouldn't be surprised
I know.
because I had a flight attendant do that with me.
You know,
Little bag that, holds certain fluids.
biohazards.
Yeah. Biohazards. Yeah, she came up and opened up the door and said, "Here you go, boys."
Locked you in.
Turned around and we're in midair, and closed the door. Looked, oh my.
She should have put the jump seat down too. Made it really hard for you guys to get that out of there.
Her name was Leslie. Leslie, if you're listening to this,
Leslie, you're my hero.
get back up. She used to, if we had see, I digress again here, and I'll let you tell your story. But
No,
Leslie would be, we'd go fly into Calgary or Lethbridge or wherever the heck it was, and I'd walk into the terminal, grab a cup of coffee, and Leslie would clean up the aircraft, and then I'd come back, and at the end of the day, I'd go to put my tunic on. Couldn't get my arm through the sleeves because she'd sewn the inside of my jacket.
I love the effort she puts into that. But that is, those are the fun pieces. I think that aviation is exhausting, and
It's a tough job.
It's a lot of really shitty days too.
Speaking of shitty days,
Speaking of shitty days, but there's days that are amazing, but there's also there's days that are like any job, right?
Like any job,
There's some that are not so great, but
so there you were.
so there I was, at this point I had spent a good few years flying and enjoying myself. I had my child, Charlie.
We need to get back into that story we had started with, though.
Yes.
That one day. Is this where this is going?
It's totally where it's going.
Okay. Very
Yeah.
good. Because you're a mom now.
I'm a mom now.
Okay.
I'm a mom now. And, it becomes a little bit harder to fly and be away once I was a new mom, my first and only. And, um, the thing, being away becomes a little bit less fun in those first few years. But we were coming back from Mexico. It was one of my last Mexico pairings. And if anybody has been cabin crew before, you know that passengers coming back from vacation are not nearly as lively as ones going down. Ones going down, oh my gosh, they're just so excited and can't wait to be there. And everybody else on the way back is like sunburnt and hungover and not having a great time and, just wants to get home at that point. So,
Yeah.
your service level is different. But we had an aircraft, I think it was 100. How many seats did we have? 100 and does this matter? I don't think it matters.
It doesn't matter.
Let's say full aircraft. I just want to say 159. 159 seats, 159 bums in those seats. And, lap held infants, just full aircraft of miserable people because they're going home now.
They're probably all hungover.
Oh my God. And so I had a lot of tacos that week. Everybody's just miserable. And I was in the back galley mid-flight, probably having like a tepid cup of noodles, eating it with some like coffee stir sticks or some other flight attendant meal. And one of the younger flight attendants, God bless her, she was so lovely and hilarious, but she busts through the curtain
In the back alley.
in the back galley. Yeah. She's like, you have to deal with this because you're a mom. I'm like, deal with what? Like, first of all, I was the first one to have a child, like have a baby when I was
A
at
lot of
American
the
as well.
flight attendants were very young.
A lot of the flight attendants were very young. Yes, which is a great time to be a flight attendant, I think. But
Yes.
so yes, you have to deal with this because you're a mom. I'm like, what happened? She's like, because someone shit on a seat. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sakes, you've got to be kidding me. So I'm like, because I'm the mom, like I deal with enough poop. Let's be serious. But no, this had to be mine. So I go out there, and as I'm coming up the aisle, I just see this couple standing in the aisle, and they're disgusted. They're absolutely disgusted. And, you don't want to cause a ruckus on a full aircraft because you can't move anybody. You also don't want everyone thinking they need to have, all the commissary and all these things to make up for this disruption that's happening. So we're working to try and like keep this situation mum. And the couple was on their honeymoon, and I'm like, oh God, this is terrible luck for you, but this is fine. You guys just go up to the galley. We'll take care of you in a second. And it was this woman, I'll never forget her. She was dressed in all neon pink, like all neon pink. And she, had likely enjoyed the very last night of her Mexican trip. Like she looked like she'd been having a great time the day before. And sure enough, there, just feces everywhere. I'm like, all right, well, so, you get the BZK kit to turn any liquid into a solid. And you've got your coffee grounds and a garbage bag to cover the seat because there's nowhere to move her. So she has to sit back in this.
Oh.
She has to sit back in this seat. And the whole time I'm trying to like clean up this shit. And it was awful, because it's not your child's. Realistically, that's not a fun. Nobody said, when I've got my like perfectly knotted scarf and, oh my God. And so she's in my ear the whole time, like, oh my God, this is so awful. And I just said, I promise you, this is a bigger nightmare for you than it is for me. If you could just go clean yourself up, basically, like, I know what I'm dealing with here. I don't need you in my ear telling me that I'm cleaning up after you. This is horrible. So she leaves, and I looked down, and Stefan, I had gloves. Of course, we have gloves on.
Yeah.
But I looked at my hand, and there was a piece of her bodily BZK'd hardened shit on my hand. And at that moment, I looked at it, and I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing?
Why am I here?
Why am I here? I've paid for an education. At the time, I was probably still paying for my education. And I was like, this has been a slice. This has been great, but I think it's time to kind of, move on a bit. I was really missing being away from my son. And, these situations started to become less funny. They were just not as enjoyable anymore. And it was like, this is not what I feel, because I wasn't going home to like have a glass of wine and laugh about it with friends. I was going home to like bedtime and getting up early and stuff. So it just became a lot. And yeah, it was a lot. But
How long did you scrub your hand?
oh my God. Oh my gosh. I remember getting off the flight and calling another flight attendant, my friend Liz, and she was in Edmonton finishing up another pairing with, all of our close friends and family that were Enerjet. And I told them what had happened, and I just heard that like wheeze laugh, that old man, like hearty wheeze laugh. And, she told the whole crew, and everybody was like, I can't believe this. But yeah, my hand got thrown up because I was the mom. So it was time. It was time. And, I had a great time. I had a great time flying. And I'm so, so glad that I took that role and really loved it when I did. But it was time to move on.
Do you remember who the flight crew was?
Your friend Alex Wozniak.
Alex
Wozniak. I do recall seeing him, and there was a lot of duplicate-looking men at that time in the flight.
You're saying we all looked the same?
No, he was another like brown-haired white guy. I can't remember what his name was, but it was Alex and somebody else that looked like him. But I remember the looks on their face were just like, I'm sorry, what had happened? Because it's nice to take a moment up in the flight deck to just decompress.
Just go up there and yeah.
Yeah, but I got it. It's 20 years later and I'm still talking about it. So
yeah. Get the call from Jenna. Do you mind if I come up there and just chill out for a minute?
I just need a moment.
I need a moment.
But it was kind of comical as well as at the end of the flight, you're doing your goodbye now, goodbye. And this woman comes up and
did she change out of her pink outfit?
She didn't.
No,
she didn't. But maybe she didn't have anything else. It was carry-on. I'm sure she did not expect to do that on the flight. I'm sure that wasn't in her cards. But, it happened. And when she was leaving, I'm like, bye, have a great day. Just straight looking at the floor. And, we kind of joked about, what does she say the next day at work when someone's like, hey, Brenda, how was your trip? Oh, I shit on the flight. That's how it was. Anyway, those are the fun parts of aviation that make us giggle. But
Linda,
if you don't laugh though, like what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
Because aviation can be a lot sometimes.
Oh boy.
Yeah. But it was time. That was a clear sign. But maybe I had pushed it too long. Maybe I'd pushed my flight attendant career too long because if I needed shit on my hand to be the clearest sign possible, then that's what it took.
Well, it was a sign. It wasn't a sign from God, but
it was a sign from someone.
Yeah,
sign from Brenda. Yeah.
Thanks, Brenda.
So terrible.
Just so the listeners know, her name wasn't really.
Her name wasn't Brenda. It was like Brenda asterisk whoever. We've changed her name. I don't even remember what her name was.
The names on this are fictional.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that was in 2015? Maybe?
Oh gosh. Well, my son was born. No, it would have been earlier. My son was born in 2012, so it was, let's say, 2013ish. So it was around that time that quite karmically and lovely, a couple positions came up internally at Enerjet. And one was for a flight attendant manager role, which I applied for as well because I was enjoying some time training in-flight classes and stuff like that. So I thought maybe that would be a good role to apply for. But also a sales support role came up, and I applied for both. And
Did we have sales? I guess we did.
It was me. I was your sales support. No, we did
Before that, though. Before you.
No. So it was a support role brought in to assist with Darren Knight with Night Aviation, which is, you can see where the story is going.
Yes.
And Brenda Trogstad was there as well. And so they were pulling in sales for Enerjet at that time, and I was brought in to support that in an admin sort of role. So for me, okay, obviously, spoiler, I got the job. I got that one. Yeah, lucky me. And I started, doing a lot of like RFP submissions, it's requests for proposals for other work, etc.
I remember the little office you guys had.
Yeah. And so that's how, I kind of entered that piece. And then, sadly, we lost an RFP to another carrier. And at which point my role was, I was going to get laid off. My role was going to be terminated because the sales support was no longer able to wasn't able to be supported. And so at that point, Darren Knight at Night Aviation, who I was working really closely with, hired me out of that. He's like, "Hey, so is there any way that you would just work for me full time?" And I'm like, "Well, I've really committed to Enerjet, and I was, my heart and soul was in that. I loved it so much. I was like, no, I told them I would give them this amount of time." He's like, "I strongly suggest you work for me." I'm like, "Oh God, I'm going to get laid off," which is exactly what happened. But yeah, and now it's been 10 years. I just celebrated my 10-year anniversary with Knight.
Okay, so let's talk about your role at Knight. You're the VP of operations for Knight Aviation and Logistics.
And logistics, yes. So my role has, changed throughout the years. And, as I look back, working with this company has very much given me everything I was looking for coming out of school in 2008. A small company where I had the opportunity to um, learn so many different things. You're just kind of thrown in to be like, here you go. Um, for example, the day I was hired, actually, one of our biggest clients had said, "Hey, we want you to do logistics." And so Darren was like, "Great. That's your job now. You need to create our company doing logistics," which is what I did starting day one. Uh,
Explain a little bit about logistics in
so
this
we do
business.
what I call people logistics. So we specialize in moving people to and that's even ebbed and flowed over time. So when I first started that, it was getting people from, home to camp. So it's, taking care of flight programs, commercial flights, busing, fleet vehicles, and getting them to camp. So a lot of remote locations, and that's kind of ebbed and flowed over time as well. We've moved, groups for Department of National Defense, which is often firefighters during wildfire season. We've done some stuff for the RCMP and moving their members around to places where they need to get moved in emergency situations. We have executive clients that travel with their family. It's again working with oil and gas groups to do their crew movements or their executive movements. So we specialize in moving people.
And you have obviously a plethora of charter companies that you use
We do,
with different
yes.
sizes of aircraft.
Everything. Yeah, absolutely everything. And that's one thing that I think works really well for us is we don't have any assets that way. We just work with everybody else to use theirs. So, we're almost like a little matchmaker in a really cutesy way of putting it. We connect, client with vendor. And so we know our vendors, sorry, and our clients so well that it's, understanding even culturally what they would prefer, like a cultural match between companies or what aircraft works better for them. Or, there's some that, don't like fuel stops, for example. So we know for sure they go on certain aircraft with certain carriers at certain times. So, it's a people puzzle too with putting our clients and vendors together and making sure that everybody's getting an efficient program, cost effective, and really just ingraining ourselves in each of them to understand what our vendors can fully offer, where they specialize, where they're excellent, and maybe where they have shortfalls. And with our clients, getting in there because aviation is never their core business ever. So we offer a lot of help and experience with saying, okay, well, what do you need? And we can put that together for you in a way that they go, "Oh my gosh, yeah, this is exactly what we need," without knowing this is
We
what
have
we needed.
50 guys that we need to get to here.
Yeah. Help.
Help.
Yeah.
So you know the industry and you know all the other companies that can do that. That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So you just marry the two.
We matchmake.
You matchmake.
We matchmake. Yeah.
So in that role,
Mhm.
now as the VP of operations, what are the challenges that you've had? Have you had any challenges, um, gender specific?
Oh, Stefan. Yes. There's always something, right? So in in this role, I want to say not so much. And the reason I say that is because I've gained a certain amount of confidence in myself and in my role and in my career. So those pieces become a little bit less and less of a me problem.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more confident going in headstrong and with what I am, the value that I
Hang
bring.
on, you're headstrong?
What? Oh my gosh.
Oh, okay.
You think you know me, Stefan. Um, but when I look at earlier, and times are changing too. times really are changing. You know, when I first started working, and let's like specify within the sales role in those environments, there was very few women at the table. Very specifically, very few young women at the table. And so the way that I would go about um, managing gaining experience was interesting because I felt very much like I had to prove myself. You know, I had to prove myself. I had to keep up. I had to be one of the men. And I wanted to be taken seriously. I really did. And you know, I would look at a meeting invite and look at the list of there. And if it was like, okay, this is all men, it's like, well, today for sure it's pants only, hair tied back. No, you know, just very simple because I wanted
Shirt
to
and
be
tie?
taken. Yes. I was very into the but you can't tell now. Things are a lot more casual
Okay.
post-COVID, but um you know, I really was mindful about being taken seriously, and I really wanted you to have a place. I wanted to have a place at the table, and I had a lot of support in that, but there was also a lot of challenges in that. There was a lot of um you know, men that weren't open to it, you know, that were you know, maybe just of a different generation or a different mindset, or you know, their experience had told otherwise, that I wasn't worth being there. Um, so that took a lot to get through in hindsight. You know, in my younger years, I certainly felt angry and frustrated about that. I mean, I was um again going back to my dad, I'm talking about my dad a lot on this podcast, which is great. He
Can we just stop there for a
Yes,
sec?
of course.
We're going to stop there and we're going to take a break. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Flying Minds. If you liked what you heard today, send me a message to chat@flyingminds.com, or you can view our website at flyingminds.com. I'd like to give a shout out to Grizzy Graphics for all the work on the logo, and to Evan Baldwin, who can be found at TTV_Valence, for his help in editing and website design.
Thanks, Dad.
Good old
Good old
dads.
dads. But I mean, I felt that I was raised with my dad being a feminist. And by that, I mean, I don't even think he realizes he was doing it. But in my home, there wasn't, for us kids, I don't recall there being pink jobs and blue jobs. I don't recall being limited on what I was supported in doing because I was a girl. I remember being in Girl Guides and thinking that I liked what the kids in Beavers were doing. And so he tried to get me into Beavers, you know, like in that way there was no reason why being a girl should limit me on what I wanted to do. And so I think once I started to experience this point in my career, I was starting to feel those perceived limitations. Like, oh, well, we're going to ask Darren the questions instead of you, or, you know, and I get that the places where I was younger in my career, certainly he was the one to go to, but it definitely felt like a lot of credibility really needed to be built simply because I was a woman. But I was also working with a very experienced man. So, and for that, I'm super grateful. I learned so much. And that's Darren Knight, the president of
And
and founder.
how long has he had night aviation?
He's had 90, I think we would probably differ on this. I believe since 2006 is when there was a number assigned to the company. But I don't think it was until about 2010 that it was really fully functioning as night aviation.
So he's been at it for quite a while.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been at it for quite a while. So, you know, there was a lot for me to be working alongside him and also be taken seriously as my own person, because he was deferred to a lot. And I think that he was always very supportive of me in my role within his company from when I was learning to now. So he wasn't putting the limits. Our company wasn't putting limits on me. It was a lot of perceived notions for me and a lot of stuff I was reading at, I was reading a room and, you know, really going into things thinking I really want to be taken seriously here. And I could see that it was going to take a little bit more for me to be taken seriously than it would have for someone else.
Do you think that you wanted to read it one way or the other?
Mm, maybe. Maybe I did. I mean, I can be a little spicy myself. But I think that I was really Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
When I was actually thinking about this on the way here about how I think that I was I really wanted to be taken seriously, and I really wanted a place at the table, and at that time, I thought it was being one of them. I thought it was being a businessman. And so I very much felt that I needed to prove to them that I was one of them instead of finding a lot of benefit in just being a businesswoman, showing, the feminine sides that have high quality and high worth and skill level and all those pieces. I was really much trying to almost mimic what I thought I needed to be included in that realm instead of, forge my own path as and really showcase the benefits of being a businesswoman versus being a businessman. And I think over time I've certainly, found the confidence and pieces to really own that. But that was a big piece at the time because I was feeling a little bit of um, being pushed aside, but at the same time I was like battling it hard.
Don't you dare push me aside.
Yes, exactly. There was one time that really sticks out in my mind as the most epic example of not only experiencing this but also having the support within my company that I did was we were meeting with a software client or in a software vendor that was trying, let's keep in mind, he was trying to sell us software.
Okay.
Okay. He was coming over from India. We were aware of who this person was, had dealt with him a couple times, phone calls, video calls, conferences, whatever. Um, and so we were meeting him downtown in, a busy, it was a Starbucks, but it was in the middle of an office building. So it was, where people are going to and from offices and for lunch, what have you. It was a little bit of a busier,
And
loud
he's from a
spot.
different country.
He's from a different country. Yes.
Okay.
Successful businessman in that country. And I was the software person. That was the role, that was one of the things that I had to deal with all the time at our company. That wasn't something anybody else was dealing with. And so I had the answers for this person. And he wanted Darren to be there, no problem. So the three of us go downtown, and we were sitting much like you and I are. Say there was, two seats and then, another seat to the right. And so I sat next to this person because I had the information he needed. And he looked at me and he said, "Can you actually move to the other seat? Because I need to talk to the man." And I was like, mm-hmm. And I'll never forget the look on Darren's face either. Having worked so closely with me, he's like, "Oh no."
Does he know what he just did?
What's happening? And I was like, okay. And so I got up and I moved, and Darren sat beside him. And he proceeded to ask Darren all the questions he needed. And every single time Darren said, "That's a question for Jen." And he would point to me. And so he would look at me to answer, and it was loud in there. And I very stubbornly, and I think this might have been a slightly immature move, but at the same time, like grossly satisfying, is I just did not increase the volume of my voice. So he really struggled to hear me. And I thought, if you didn't want to hear what I had to say, then you're not going to hear what I have to say. And I don't want your business, and, or you don't want our business, I guess, is really
Yeah.
what it came down to. But, so there were things like that, being in, at that time, somewhat male dominated environment that I was up against. So yes, I was perceiving some of it and had my back up against the wall 100%. But yes, there were, multitudes of experiences like that, had me sort of, really working hard to come into my own.
Did you notice any of that as a flight attendant?
No. Well, it's different as a flight attendant.
Mhm.
It really is because um I don't even really know how to answer that because
You
you're
don't have to.
no, I do. I want to answer it. It is just different. And I think everybody probably understands what I'm thinking I want to say without knowing how to say it. But um and every flight attendant knows exactly it too. Everybody thinks that you are at service to them when you're up there. If you're, it doesn't matter if you're a server in a restaurant or in the sky. And I'm not even comparing the two in that way because I very much believe that the biggest power that flight attendants have is knowing how to get you out of an aircraft that's just hit the ground. So let's not.
And that's been shown very
Mhm.
recently with the accident in Toronto.
Absolutely. I have the
Yep.
utmost respect for every and all flight
Yep.
attendant. Um, and but what a lot of travelers, whether they would say it or not, oftentimes they think you were there to serve them. So of course there's different ways of treating people
Hmm.
when you're a flight attendant, and so it was a different environment there for sure. Um, I personally didn't experience it with flight crews like any of our pilots, for example. Um,
Well, I think
and I'm
that's why
only
you and
saying
I got along so well, because I liked
totally.
how spicy you were.
But even, at Energy at the time, there was no female pilots. There was only male pilots. So and that's just the difference in what I'm trying to explain there is that I always felt very supported by those men as well.
Mhm.
So in that specific environment, I didn't experience that. I get that there likely is, and I can't speak to every and anyone, but in my experience, I did not feel that way. I felt very supported within the company we were working for. It was almost just out in this business world where those experiences started to come from. But I also think that I was placed in an environment or placed myself in an environment where I wasn't one of many. As a flight attendant, I was one of 50 women between the ages of, 20 and 35, 40, whatever our age range was at Energet at the time. But then I go out into the business world and I was the only female often that was under 40, under even under 30, I think at the time, to be quite honest, um, at a table of not younger women as well. So it was a different place for me to be put in where I didn't have um, anyone to relate to.
Hmm. Okay.
Hmm.
Great answer.
Thank you.
Let's talk about mentors.
Yeah.
Have you had many mentors in this industry? Even
Yeah.
uh, it doesn't have to go back or just be with Knight, but
Hmm.
in this industry, in the aviation industry, it's
Yeah. And I think that mentorship and support is, very much how I've gotten through any career stage for sure. I mean, I think back to when I was a new flight attendant in a new industry, in essence. Our head of in flight, Trina Squires, which I know that's a fairly renowned name.
I know
And
where Trina is
you know where
now.
Trina is now. She to this day is one of those people that I very much credit as being one of the best female mentors I ever had. She was, I felt we used to joke about how I don't know how she does it because we felt that we didn't wanna disappoint her. We wanted to make sure we did a good job, and it wasn't like we were scared of Trina, but we wanted to do a good job. We wanted to be great for her, and she'd taught us this certain level of standard that we really had to live up to, but she was so approachable, we could ask her for a tampon.
All right.
That's what we always said. We were like, "You know what? That is a fine line." Like, she's so genuinely approachable, but at the same time, don't cross her. Like, we didn't want to, but I learned a great deal from her, and she was really great, and, one of the things she told me was, some days if the best thing you can do is show up, that's what you do. Not every day is gonna be this, hyper productive, absolutely amazing day, but if the best you can do is show up, then do your best and just show up. And that was something that I even tell my son or any employees that we have at time, or myself even, that's one thing for sure. So she was great. And she was, thinking back to, I often think of how she held herself, as a female in aviation. And I very much appreciate having the opportunity to have had her so young in my career
Mhm.
as someone to look to. Um, and moving throughout my career, they started to come in different forms. I mean, I want to give so much credit to Darren um, for working with me and really, really believing in me truly from the beginning. I think that he saw a lot in me that would, of course, benefit his company, but I learned so much from him and I was so grateful for that. And I think having him in my court was an unreal thing because he was held to such regard and he was taken seriously within the industry. So to almost have his, check beside, yep, she's good, she's smart, she can do this. I put full trust in her. I I'm so grateful for that as
It
well.
wouldn't have taken him very long to find that out.
Yeah. No. Yay me.
Give
But
yourself a pat on the
yeah,
back.
exactly. But we've worked so closely, like I said, for so long. But even to this day, we will, and we're kind of getting to a point now where we're guiding each other through things because things are progressing and things are changing. To a point where we can leave a meeting and I'll say, "Hey, just so you know, you asked that woman. You said you probably don't know." And then whatever he was talking about, I'm like, next time, maybe you could say, "Hey, have you heard of?" Or, d- you know, instead of assuming that she doesn't know that. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even know." But it's just almost like a generational transition of like, "Hey, this is how we're going to guide these conversations a little bit differently now." And he's, luckily receptive to that. But we're getting to a good place now where we're coaching each other, which I think is really cool. But yeah, he's always had my back, and he's always stood up for me and, made sure that I have nothing but opportunity within the industry. So super grateful for that. So all the support and mentorship is so crucial,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely so important. And I mean, I've looked at different ways of seeking out leadership, um, mentorship, through different female leadership groups or anything along those lines. And some I've loved, and some have not been for me. Some I thought felt really cheap, to be quite honest, and I didn't like what they were saying, but um, I think everybody just has to make sure that they're setting themselves up to learn from others. You can't, you're not going to be an expert without learning and absorbing other people's experiences and information. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, why not cut to the chase?
Yep.
Why struggle through it ourselves? Why wouldn't I be like, "Hey, Stefan, what did you think about this? Or what have you learned when dealing with this?" There's no point in not setting yourself up to.
Good thing you didn't ask me. Actually, it's funny. I've, I've been in this industry over 40 years as a pilot. And just in the last year that I've been at Flair, everybody seems to think you've seen everything after this long, anyways. In the last year at Flair, I have learned a ton
Hmm.
from a gentleman by the name of Greg Cooper. Actually, Greg Cooper, senior and junior. Uh, there's a lot of things I didn't know, and this past year has been really good.
That's cool.
Yeah. So even at my age, lots of gray. You can still teach an old dog new tricks. So
Well, I mean, we should always be learning. When we look at aviation too, it's been um, a highly, like, quickly progressed industry. I mean, aviation's only been around for, less than 200 years. And look at all the things we can do with it. So technology's changing, protocols are changing, the world is changing, things
mm-hmm.
socially are changing. Everything is changing so much. We would be so ignorant to think we've learned it all, or to think that there's never going to be anything new you can learn in an industry you've been in for, 20, 30, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just, put on your blinders and think, "I got this," well, you're going to, you know,
Yeah, one of the things that I don't like to hear from pilots, especially the older gentlemen, and it's no offense to them, I'm not pointing fingers at them, but a lot of times they just kind of go, "Oh, I'm just too old for this. I don't know if I've got it in me to keep learning this, right?"
hmm
But you do.
yeah.
You just have to have that mindset. Go, hey, teach me something new.
Yeah. And I mean, to each their own. If they're, have an experience that they've just exhausted or they're just got other interests or what have you, that's fine. That's fine. But I mean, you just have to keep learning. And
Yeah.
if you want to be within an industry, you can't leave yourself behind. A lot of people would, have a mindset of like, "Oh, well, things are just changing. I just can't keep up." Yes, you can. If you want to, you can. You just have to,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd be silly to think that there's nothing new. I mean, even within the way anything's done, like look at UAVs, what those have done
Mm-hmm.
to the industry in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a massive new thing. And it's not stopping now, but like you can't say, "Oh, pipeline patrol should only be done by single engine aircraft. It's like, well, if that's what you think, you're going to get left behind if you can't absorb the fact that look at,
Do they use UAVs in pipeline
oh yeah,
patrol?
they do. They have all sorts of fancy cameras that can read like fully vegetation health. And oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Really?
Absolutely.
And who runs it? Like who flies it?
Drone pilots.
They're sitting in an office.
They're sitting in a van usually.
Oh yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's actually really interesting. So I was sitting in a meeting with, and this was a few years ago now, with, a pilot, single engine aircraft who does pipeline patrols, and the what's the word I'm looking for? President of Canadian UAVs. His name's Sean Greenwood. This guy, I swear to God, if you want to know anything about drones, talk to him, and he will make sure you know everything. Like so skilled. But they were in essence doing the same thing, but in two vastly different ways. And it's like, man, if these guys could talk to each other, and learn, okay, what did this guy know in his time of doing this work? And what's this guy got going on? And where does he see the future of this going? What an interesting conversation that would be. And no information would get left behind, you know?
Hmm.
And Sean has done a ton of research and all those things. But it's interesting because I think a lot of pieces of any industry, but if we just talk about ours specifically, it seems like there's a lot of pilots coming in and pilots going out. And let's just say pilots for sake of argument. There's many different roles within here.
Yep.
But let's just say for sake of argument, pilots coming in and pilots coming out. And Stefan, just like anybody, that the way you fly an aircraft now is much different than you did however many years ago. The technology is different. All these pieces
The
are different.
technology is definitely different. I mean, the way we fly it's still,
But you fly it.
you add those things forward and the houses get smaller and you pull them back and the houses get bigger.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
But there is different technology. But when you hear stories, about, flights calling a mayday into Europe because the autopilot goes off, it's like, okay, well, that's not really a mayday,
Yeah.
but sure. So there's obviously a gap in information there. And so there needs to be a more formal handoff, I think, like a big shift change on, hey, I'm leaving. Here's everything I know. And you're coming in. Here's the access to all that information.
Mhm.
So you can do your best job moving forward. I mean, we have to be learning from everything that the people before us have come with, They've learned a ton. They have a ton of experience, and to let that go without hearing it is a shame.
How much has your industry changed in the logistics side of it?
A lot. I think it has changed a lot. And from what I can see, a lot of it has to do with, economics, to be quite honest. It's less of, I want to say, it's not less of technology. Of course, there's software changes and always something to make things efficient. But what we certainly see as one of the biggest changes is, well, COVID was a big one. And the reason I say that is because we had a lot of, pilots leaving the industry, for example. And then Transport Canada came in, shortly after with crew change or
Policies, yeah.
policies. And so I shouldn't say crew change policies. Let me correct that. That's for crew fatigue. I don't have the words in my mouth right now. But anyway, new policy changes for
Open your mouth.
Stefan, you're so funny.
Sorry.
And here we are. Yeah.
See, I don't know where this stuff comes from. The stuff that comes out of my mouth, you just hear the voices in my head.
Yeah, it's terrifying. But there was a lot of, things within operating crews that changed greatly over the last 5 years that really affected the way that, the charter operations do their flying, where you needed one crew to do it before. Now you need 1.5. And you have half the crews because they're leaving to bigger carriers or they left the industry altogether. You have aging aircraft that, parts have become insanely expensive. There's
Mhm.
faulty parts that were going around, like all these sorts of things that have caused carriers to get rid of certain gauge of aircraft, because they don't want to operate them anymore because they become too expensive to maintain, and, things like that are really, really changing where I can see, when you look at managed aircraft, like a company, Stefan Co., has their own aircraft now and a company just manages it because it's harder to rely on carriers. There's
Mhm.
so many changes. There's so many changes. And I think that all the carriers have done an amazing job keeping up. honestly, keeping people in the air and making sure that their safety standards don't waver, and making sure that they're still doing their best to hire, and looking at different ways to hire pilots and skilled pilots, and bringing in mentorship to, smaller companies to mentor these younger pilots coming up. And um, so it's hit a little bit of an ebb, you know? It feels like there's a hole in the boat a little bit. And so, but, it's really getting patched up, and it's like, okay, this thing happened and all these things have happened, but I think we're kind of getting the hang of it to a point where it's going to go back to being quite successful, but it's been,
Been a
a real
journey.
challenge. It's been a challenge.
I'm going to give a plug out to a young company that's called 49th Degree Aviation.
Mm.
And Jaden, who is one of the individuals that started it, it's actually a mentorship program for young pilots.
Really? That's amazing.
So he actually, or 49th Degree, put an ad on LinkedIn looking for mentors for young pilots wanting to come into the pilots that maybe not even have a license.
Oh, brilliant.
And
just looking to be.
Yeah. So I sent
Yeah.
in something to Jaden. I said, I'll be a mentor.
That's cool.
So you get, I got put with a young lad. I got to give him a call back. I apologize. But he came from the Ukraine and he's in Canada and he's not working in aviation, but he wants to get into aviation in Canada. And,
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him and what route should he go and that sort of stuff. So it's kind of nice that, speaking of mentors,
Mm-hmm.
49th Degree is for pilots anyways in Canada. And they're just young. So
That's really cool.
yeah.
I think that, it's everybody's responsibility to look for mentors, but it's also, our job to be mentors as well, to give proper feedback, and to, be in a position where you're approachable and people want to ask you about your career or your thoughts, or maybe just a little bit of advice. I mean, I certainly find at any sort of aviation function, whether it's, a CBAA meeting or something like that, there's the younger females coming out to be like, how did you get to where you are? What is it that you're doing? What would you suggest I do? Where would you, what kind of experience should I gain? And so I always really, for one, it always takes me aside. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm the adult now? Sorry, what?
You're the mother now, remember?
Sorry, what? So I guess that's where I am, and that's fine.
I'm tired of adulting.
Yeah. I'm looking for an adult. Oh, wait, it's me. But I always find that really cool, actually, to be like, okay, now this is just the role I have to go with. And it's not that I'm not seeking mentorship anymore. I 100% am, from anywhere I can look, but I'm also recognizing that I'm now in a position to be a mentor, which is really cool. It feels really cool to be there and to also have people looking to you. I was in Vancouver last week with one of our carriers, and we were having some preseason meetings for joint clients of ours for fishing groups on the West Coast. So we go out every spring and every fall to have a preseason and a postseason meeting. And, we go in there and we sit down. They're like, okay, hey, what do you think? How do you think we should strategize this? And I'm like, this is cool, actually. This is really cool to be like, these are our clients. Here's what I want to say. How do you think I should say it? And really collaborating and working together on our shared experience and our shared skills in order to, properly service a client and make sure that everything we're wanting to say is said in the way that it should be. At one point she kept saying, I'm really hoping that this summer I'm really hoping that, we have enough pilots. I'm really hoping. I'm like, just say you're expecting. I'm expecting this, but even just conversations like that where we can share information or insight on what we're doing is, helpful to one another. I just don't think we should ever stop learning from each other at all.
And no argument from me.
Right? Right? It's
Yeah,
really cool.
That is very cool.
But you have to be open to it. I think that's the main thing. You just have to be open to it.
Well, you know what? For me, if I may, now that I'm not in a flying role, I do have a lot of experience that I can share.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that part of this podcast helps some young individuals wanting to get into this industry. It doesn't matter what side of the industry. Aviation will, once it's in your blood, you can never get it out, right?
Ooh, it's like fly tape. It's so sticky. Once you're in, you're there. But that being said too, I think it's important to recognize that you do have value in your experience. I think it's easy for us sitting here to be like, oh yeah, this is what I do. But then you talk to a stranger, someone who they're like, oh, that's really cool. Actually, I had no idea. It's like, oh, wait a minute. We do have something to share and something to say, and everybody does. But I think we get so wrapped up in it's our norm that it's not recognized that there is value in sharing that. And
Hmm.
somebody will have value in it. And gosh, you're going to have value in sharing too, you
Yeah.
know?
I actually got a really cool email from somebody I went to school with. I haven't seen in years.
Mhm.
And she said, I just started listening to your podcast.
Mhm.
She said, I know nothing about aviation. She said, but I absolutely love this.
Yeah.
She said, keep talking, keep bringing up these episodes. So, and everyone's a little bit different, yourself, and I've got pilots and I've got doctors, and it's all aviation related. And, when you hear those comments from somebody that isn't in the industry, I call them ground people. um,
Ground people?
Ground people, well, they're
Okay.
never in the air, right? I don't. That's probably politically incorrect, but I apologize.
Isn't everything? Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, it's kind of nice when you hear that sort of stuff. So there's more stories that we can share, and then we start sharing with each other, right?
Mhm. Well, it's the same as, kind of looping back to the beginning of our conversation, when my grandfather died, as I got older, those are where the questions were coming from. I wish I would have heard more. I wish I would have asked more. So in the act of, sharing and having conversations while we're, alive and well, and just acknowledging that there's value in what, we've all experienced.
Could you say to the person listening,
Mhm.
specifically my sons, listen to Jenna, talk to your father, ask him questions,
Yes.
because you don't want to be the. I mean, I'm joking when I say this, but I wish I'd asked my grandfather and my mother, and
Yeah.
lots of questions.
Well, and hopefully, as socially we progress, it becomes more comfortable to talk. I don't think it always has been comfortable to talk. Lots of things are kept quiet or, oh, we don't speak of those or things or anything. So, as we socially progress, it is up to us,
Hmm.
to make sure that we are sharing so that that information can
Well,
get
we're in a
passed on.
different time where podcasts and YouTube, and
Hmm.
everybody's talking about whatever,
Yeah,
how to trim your toenails or whatever the heck it is,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
But how fun, because I mean, we could go and have this conversation, which we have recently.
Yep.
Hey, let's catch up.
Yep.
But to be able to share our conversation with other people it is a cool thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I have one final question I'd like to finish off here.
Mhm.
What would you say? You mentioned it just recently. What would you say to an individual that wants to get into aviation? How would you guide them?
Through aviation, I would guide them in saying that you don't just have to be a pilot or a flight attendant to be in aviation. There are so many things to be involved in within aviation without having to fly an aircraft or be in one all the time. I actually think that's probably one of the hardest lifestyles to undertake,
Mm-hmm.
to be quite honest. But I think that I would just encourage you to look at every facet of it, and look at your skills. What's going to make you successful? If you're mechanically inclined, of course there's engineers and all those pieces, or maybe you are service-based in business or what have you, but it's not just, putting on a uniform, grabbing your rollerblade and heading to the airport. There's so many ways to be in aviation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dispatch, anything in flight ops. And there's a few people in operations that I really want to get on here
Yeah.
because they've got some great stories.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a pilot story, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think also think a little bit broader than our main carriers. Of course they're very attractive, of course, lifestyle wise, but think greater than the big city hubs. There's a lot of communities like, northern communities, for
Mm-hmm.
example, or any sort of remote areas that do need access, and there's a lot of aviation opportunities within those as well. And um, in my opinion, those would be some of the really cool experiences that you would get to have and end up sharing with somebody else as well.
Yeah. I interviewed a gentleman here just last week, and he's a senior pilot at WestJet. And he said that, you know, he apologized to his boss at WestJet. And he said, honestly, that some of the best flying that I've ever done and that I enjoyed the most was working for a smaller carrier
Mhm.
in a northern community.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said, I miss it.
Yeah.
So
I can see that. I can see that for sure. But yeah, just think a little bit broader with it. There's a lot in aviation to take part in without having to be in an airplane.
okay. And you have a young son. What are you going to tell him when he wants to, you know, let him go in that route? Or
He, for a while, was really keen to be a pilot. And I don't know. I personally don't think he's great in an emergency situation. So I don't believe
he's young. He's young.
I
Don't
know.
be judging now.
We got in a little fender bender, like somebody had rear-ended us. And it was a little teeny one. Like everybody's coming to a stop and they bumped us. And oh my gosh, he absolutely just lost it. And I was like, oh, maybe emergency response is not for you, but that's fine. But I really want him to, and I encourage him to take stock of what he's naturally good at and what he's naturally interested in
Mhm.
and go there. You know, I don't want him to feel like he needs to be, you know, anything because of myself, his dad, our families, what have you, because that's not what's going to make him happy or successful. And I think that things shouldn't be so hard, you know? So
Mhm.
if you are drawn to something and you are naturally good at something, well, you're going to find a lot of like really, I don't want to say effortless success, but it's going to come naturally to you if you just kind of follow your intuitive piece.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Great information.
Yeah.
Well, Jenna, I think we're going to tie it up there. I want to thank you for a great, candid conversation. It's been fun.
It has been fun. I'm delighted that you've asked me to be here.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I asked to be here.
Well,
Knock, knock. Hi, I'd like to come talk to you.
Can't tell how many emails and texts got, Stefan. No,
Well,
it wasn't like that.
I'm very flattered that you've accepted my discreet invitation to be on your podcast.
Discreet
Thank you.
invitation. Okay. Okay, everybody. Thank you for listening to this on Flying Minds. And if you like the content or if you have any comments on it, please send us a message at chat@flyingminds.com. Have a great day and keep the greasy side down.